Mm. Hello, everybody. If you can hear me, there is a question portion of the webinar. If you could just drop a hello into there, into the chat section or the question section, that would be much appreciated. Yay. Hello, Susan Anako. Hello, Simone. Hello, Erica. Thank you all for listening. I'm glad you could hear me clearly. We will start in about a minute. There are 2 attached handouts. If you all could just take some time to download the 2 attachments, they could really help you understand the webinar and just keep on hand for reference when you're searching for questions or about what we do and who we serve. They would be wonderful references. So there's a CPSP program summary sheet attached, and there is the class profile attached. We will start at 7:01. Can you all see the screen? Here, but don't have video. Give me one moment. Let me just share my screen. All right, you all should have access to video at this point. Is there anyone who cannot see? Or who cannot? I guess if you can't hear, then you will be able to hear me. All right. For those of you who are just joining, please take a moment to download the handouts. There are 2 of them and would serve as a point of reference for who we serve, etc. when you are, if you have any questions, they're good references. The attachments are in the handout section. You should be seeing my screen, which is showing on my end as being shared. It says, welcome families. We will be starting shortly. Please be sure to download the handouts. Can everybody see the welcome screen? I just want to make sure that you all have access to the screen at least before we start. Awesome. Thank you all for responding. All right, so for those of you who can't see or find the handouts, I believe they will be emailed out. And if not, you can always email us to get a copy of them. But I am ready to start because our attendance is starting to rise. So first and foremost, I would like to welcome you all and thank you all for tuning in tonight, having registered and being interested in a better chance. We are always excited to work with new families, and we are always excited at the opportunity to change and affect so many wonderful, amazing, intelligent lives. My name is Nyanka Joseph. I've been with A Better Chance for just over 2 years. I work as the Assistant Program Manager for the Northeast and New York Metro region. That is anywhere from Northern Jersey up until Maine. I did not go to private school. I went to public school, but having gone to visit schools and visit our students at schools, I am always super jealous that I never got the opportunity. So it just definitely makes me happy to work with those families and work with families like yours, helping them place into some of the amazing schools that we work with. So what is A Better Chance? A Better Chance is a national education access nonprofit organized and founded in 1963 by headmasters of private schools. Our mission is to increase substantially the number of well-educated young people of color who are capable of assuming positions of responsibility and leadership in American society. So this is a photo here of our founding class. So as you can see, our first class were all male. Fortunately for us, the organizers of A Better Chance saw the flaw in their mistake a year later and started accepting girls as well. So from 1964, we have been both gender inclusive and have been placing students in schools for a very, very long time. So when we talk about leadership, leadership means a lot of things, but we do pride ourselves, excuse me, we do pride ourselves on having a very large reach in terms of alumni. We have alumni in all kinds of fields, anywhere from the arts to nonprofit to technology. Some of our bigger alumni that you may know, we have Bertha Coombs, who attended Milton Academy through a better chance, who is a reporter for CNBC. We also have Governor Deval Patrick, who went to Milton as well, who was the 71st governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have famous writers like Roxane Gay. We, again, have a very large reach in terms of alumni and in terms of where our scholars end up in their respective fields. So if you have a student who's interested in something that you might think is a little non-traditional, that's fine. We, again, pride ourselves on supporting students with all kinds of aspirations. So what exactly does a better chance do? A better chance recruits, which is again, some of you might have seen us at fairs, some of you might have had us come to your school to speak to your student, and some of you are on this webinar, which also counts as recruiting. So that's what we do. We provide access to a school network. We have a school network of roughly 330 something odd private schools and some CPSBs, which we will go into detail a little bit more about later, but we provide you access to that school network that works with us to accept our students. We streamline the application process. So that means that a regular family off the street who decides, I would like to apply to private schools, they would have to go through any number of platforms, including Ravenna, and apply to each school independently. They would have to pay a fee for each and every school they apply to, and they would have to probably write multiple essays, get multiple letters of recommendations, etc. Whereas in our process, we do not have our families do not pay any fees to apply to schools that we send them to. Our families also don't have to send multiple recs or essays because, again, it is all streamlined through our application. So you, in most cases, you fill out one application and that application goes to multiple schools. There are exceptions to that rule, but the schools generally accept our application and may ask for an additional supplement, but you will not be paying any application fees. So that means you'll be saving a ton of money and you'll be saving a ton of times having teachers, having your students, having other school staff writing recommendations, and all the other things that go into an application. We match students with schools. So what does that mean? That could mean a number of things, but we do generally ask our school for an idea of what type of student they are looking for. So maybe I would ask one of my New York City day schools what kind of student they are looking for. Maybe they say, hi, Nainka, this year we are only open to accepting sixth grade girls, but we are particularly looking for sixth grade girls who can tap dance, right? A family who is not in our cohort would not have that information. So they might have a boy apply, and that boy's chances would be significantly less than our girls' chances because we know that the school is looking for girls. Now, yes, we do factor in what the school wants, but we also factor in what the family wants, right? Are you a traditional family? Are you a family that likes a little bit more flexibility in terms of what school curriculum looks like? So we also try to match what the family wants in terms of school structure, what is a good fit for their student, with what the school looks for. And that means that you will be more likely to get a placement and less likely to waste your time, energy, and resources applying for a school that will most likely not accept your students. Then after this beautiful matching occurs, we are on the phone advocating for your student. So around this time of year, which is January, February, and a little bit into March, we are on the phone speaking to schools about your student. So depending on your region, we will spend some time with your students. We will get to know them based on what we've read about them, based on our interactions at various workshops, and we will be on the phone speaking to schools, advocating for your student and telling them, like, this student is a good match for your school based on what you said and based on what the family said. So we think that they would be a very likely possibility of placement. So we do advocate for your student. Lastly, we provide support in a manner of ways, especially after your student has successfully placed at a member school. We do provide lots of support for them in terms of scholar support, in terms of opportunity to apply to various partnerships like EEIL and things like that. We just would like to make it clear that we do not provide financial scholarships, but we do leverage over $20 million annually in financial aid dollars for our scholars to attend independent schools. Again, we do not provide scholarships, but we do make it a point to help you negotiate those FA dollars if possible. So about our numbers, over 50 years of service, we have about 500 new scholars annually. That means that we place about 500 students every single year in one of our member schools. So that means across the country, we have about 2,000 students who are currently enrolled at a member school, and we have leveraged over $100,000 in education opportunity for every scholar, which means that over the 15,000 alumni that we currently have, we have helped them and their family get a lot of education and resources. Are there any questions so far? You don't have to worry about what EIL is. It's not super important. If you research and identify schools, yes, that will be taken consideration into your matching process. And income limits for scholarships, they vary based on schools. There will be a moment later on in the presentation for questions, but I just wanted to make sure that everything so far was clear. So what type of schools do we work with? We work with 3 types of schools, generally speaking. The first is independent day schools. For our younger applicants, especially those looking for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade placement, independent day schools tend to be the go-to options. Parents of high school applicants, don't panic. There are also independent day schools for high school students as well. But we do encourage our high school applicants to keep an open mind to boarding, because boarding is where you will find your most aid and your most placements for high school students. That being said, just to explain what independent day is, independent day school, your student leaves in the morning and they come back in the afternoon. You see them every day. So that's an option that generally most of our parents jump to joy for, because they're so scared to send their babies to boarding school. And our second type of school is independent boarding school. Again, like I mentioned earlier, especially for our high school applicants, we strongly, strongly urge that you have an open mind towards boarding, because that is where you get a lot of your options. And to shut out boarding would be essentially to shut out community school programmings. So you are cutting down probably about 60% of your options. So if you are a high school parent who's nervous about boarding, we just ask you to start doing your research early and keep an open mind, because we do place a ton of students there, and the parents are always, they always come back a year later. I've been through it for 2 years now, and say how happy they are to have been open to boarding school, and how happy their student is and how well they are doing. So just a heads up about independent boarding school. Just to be clear, there are multiple types of boarding. There's 5-day boarding. That means that your student leaves on Monday and comes back on Friday. There is a 7-day boarding. That means your student is pretty much gone for the entire week, for long stretches of time at time blocks, but they generally come back home for holidays or things of that nature. Lastly, we have community school programs. community school programs are independent, or not independent schools. They are public schools in incredibly wealthy neighborhoods. And if you have any understanding of how public education is funded, public education is funded through property taxes. So schools in extremely rich neighborhoods tend to have a lot more money at their disposals. So their public schools look very, 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 very different from public schools in neighborhoods with lower property values. So just a heads up on CSPs. CSPs are only open and available for high school students. And I believe there is a financial aid cap of about $100,000. So if you are a family who's making less than $100,000, community school programs is a great thing to keep an eye on and to keep an open mind about. They're completely free. Students get free housing. They get a house mother or house father. They are typically separated by gender. Students get a cook, students get a tutor. So just a heads up on community school programs. I see there is a question about what is a member school and do you have to live in Philly to qualify? A member school is an independent school who has partnered with a better chance to accept our students. So we have 330 something, I believe, of them across the country. So your student essentially has 330 options through us that they could apply to. You can live anywhere in the country and you qualify for our program based on upcoming criteria that we're going to talk about. So financing independent schools, how do you finance it? I know that some of you already have questions about that, but independent schools use various financial aid tools forms that help them determine how much you can realistically afford to pay for your child's education. This calculation is based on your household income, expenses, assets, liabilities, and the like. Typically, financial aid is offered by schools is need-based. That means they will give you as much. Sorry, I'm just making sure that my audio is working. Can you guys still hear me? Just a quick yes from 1 or 2 of you is fine. Awesome, thank you. So typically schools provide aid based on need. So that means that if you are making $48,000 and can only afford to pay $6,000 of tuition, this is just an example, or better yet, 3,000, like what our example here shows, then the school will provide you with $45,000 in tuition aid. So that means that your family's only paying $3,000 out of $48,000 of tuition. Again, this varies based on school and based on your own financial aid application. There are various financial aid forms, such as the PFS, which is the Parents Financial Statement, and TADS. When you get accepted into our program, we do have, I think it's a series of webinars that kind of explains financial aid to you, how to fill out the forms and all this fun stuff. Right now, you don't have to get too into the weeds with it, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. Again, we do not fill out financial aid documents for you, but we do provide you with the information to help you fill it out as efficiently as possible, so that schools could give you the aid that you need for your student. Wonderful. And just to be clear, schools don't usually ask for family contributions in a lump sum. A lot of schools do give you the options to pay in installments, whether that be monthly over a 10-month period or yearly or monthly over a 12-year period. Schools do work with you very closely to make sure that your student and your family can afford the school. So I saw a lot of you asking about eligibility. So just to be clear, you can apply to a better chance if you fall into one of the following categories. If your student is currently in grades 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, and are looking for placements in anything from grades 6 to 11, you will probably qualify. If your student could demonstrate academic talent by getting good grades, A's and B's consistently, especially in math and English. And they can receive good teacher recommendations. That's super important. So students, if you're listening, be nice to your teachers and get good grades. They will probably qualify. If your student could show leadership potential, that means that they participate in activities outside of the classroom. We do consider and understand that there are very serious limitations in terms of income and availability of these things. So being able to participate in activities outside of school isn't a make or break, but it's just nice to see that your student is doing something outside of the classroom, because a lot of schools do appreciate well-rounded students. And last but not least, your student self-identifies as a student of color, i.e. they are African American, Black / back, Latino, Latinx, Asian, Native American, or multiracials. And if they are not a child of an A Better Chance alumni. If your student falls into these categories, then you are certainly eligible to apply. So there are 3 phases of our of our process. The first would be applicant. Hopefully you all have started your application. You have it in the works. Get it in as soon as possible. So that's phase 1. Phase 1 lasts anywhere from February to about June. Then you have phase 2, which means that your student is a candidate of the program, meaning they have been accepted into the cohort. So you would apply in February, you would hear back in June as to whether you were accepted or not. And when you hear back as to whether you're accepted or not and you're accepted, you transition from applicant to candidate. When you transition to candidate, then you would participate in workshops, and then you will be referred to a member school. Just to be clear, our workshops do not happen every week or every weekend. They tend to be on the weekends, or they tend to be webinars like this one that typically happens around this time of night. But we do understand, and again, support and appreciate our families have lives. So we don't have workshops every weekend, but they tend to be about 1 or 2, I think there are about 7 of them spread out from August to February. And then you will be referred to our member schools. As you remembered, we spoke about a little bit later. The application is online at abetterchance.org. It is all digital. You do not have to mail it in. Just a tidbit about the candidate. There is a summer workshop that I think is 2 to 4 days in the summertime, depending. That information will be mailed to you, or not mailed to you, emailed to you ahead of time, so you kind of know when it's happening. But for now, we just would love it if you could just submit an application. And then phase 3. So phase 2 happens, I would say, from June to about March of the following year. So say you were an applicant in February of 2020, you would be a candidate from June of 2020 to March or February of 2021. And after your student has signed a contract with a member school in March of 2021, then they will transition to a scholar. So just to be clear, if your student is currently in 4th grade, they will be looking for 6th grade placement. If your student is currently in 7th and currently in 5th grade and they apply to our program and get accepted, they will be placed for 7th grade. You get placed for 2 grades out of whatever year your student is currently in. 9th grade, if they're currently in 9th grade, they'd be placed for 11th grade. If they're currently in 6th grade, they'd be placed for 8th grade. So this is just a visual of what I explained a little bit of right now. The applicant, say, of 2020, February 1st, application is released. Again, it's online, available at abetterchance.org. The application deadline, it closes on April 15th. Again, we do not encourage you to wait until April 14th, because it will just make it more difficult for you. The earlier you start and submit, the earlier your questions or any confusion can be cleared up. In May, we typically have benchmark testing. I believe after you submit your application, you will get an email for benchmark testing. So again, the earlier you get your application in, the more likely you will be to get this information early and get the ball rolling. And then in June of 2020, you will hear back as to whether or not your student was accepted into the program. Then they're accepted. We move to the summer and fall, where you have multiple workshops, where you have ISEE, which is the test, and SSAT, which is a test for independent schools, practice. You have essay help. You have time to start visiting schools, sending us a list of schools that you're interested in and think will be a good match. In December is the financial aid deadline. We do give you a webinar that kind of explains that. January and February, you probably should be wrapping up school interviews and the like. And then phase 3, after they've successfully signed to a school, they become a scholar until you're pretty much a better chance scholar for life. So after you sign to a member school and you successfully graduate, you're a better chance member for life. Again, like I said earlier, note that this is an 18-month placement cycle. So students who are applying out of 7th grade will be placed for 9th grade, and so forth and so on. So whatever grade your student is in, they will be placed for 2 grades out. So I just lightly touched on SSAT and ISEE. Those exams are entrance exams for admissions into independent schools. So almost every single independent school that we work with requires your student to have one or more of these exams in order to be considered for admission. So you guys now, if you have a note pen out or your phone app, something open, take the note down, SSAT and ISEE. They're online. I believe both sites have practice questions. I'm sure if you Google them, you will get probably practice exams somewhere, or they have books. I strongly urge you to have your students start studying for the exam. It doesn't hurt, even if they don't get accepted. I think it's worth pursuing. Just a reminder, I will answer questions at the end of the webinar. To complete your A Better Chance application, you have to sit for an SSAT benchmark. Again, we encourage you to submit your application early, because the earlier you submit it, the earlier you get the link for registration. And that just makes your life so much easier, because you know the date, you know the location, everything ahead of time. Registration details for the benchmark, which is the SSAT benchmark, will be forwarded to you after you submit your application. The SSAT benchmark exam is free. You do not have to pay for the benchmark. We cover the cost. We would just love for you to take it so that we can consider it as part of your application. If you are accepted into the cohort, you will need to sit for the actual exams in the fall, which is why I say get those books or whatever you need for your student to start studying from now, because the more practice they have, the more likely they will be to succeed in the fall. You do not have to prep your student for the benchmark SSAT, but again, I strongly encourage you to start early, because it doesn't hurt to get a leg up on preparing for the exam. So just a quick reminder, our process is free. So if you get accepted, you won't really have to pay anything except for maybe the exams, and that depends on your income. We do give you notice in June about the cost, so you have time to save up for them if you don't qualify for a fee waiver. We do help you identify additional schools to complement your current options. So a family might send us a list of 3 schools, but we add 7 to them. I can't tell you how many times I've had families come to me and thank me or thank my supervisor for giving them schools that they would never have thought to look at, and that now they are thriving at, now they have friends at, now they're just doing so very well at. So just a heads up in terms of you coming to the program with an open mind, because we will give you schools that you may not like off the bat, but that upon further exploration you might think is a good fit. So again, applications involve recommendations from, I think, a principal and counselor and from a teacher, which is why we ask you to start early. It's very hard and stressful to reach out to a teacher, maybe it's April 12th, telling them you need it by April 15th, that might make them very unhappy. So we encourage you to start the application and submit it as soon as possible to avoid any confusion or any, to just minimize the stress on all ends. So again, yay, the application is open. You can visit abetterchance.org, create an account, and start your application. The due date, that means the application closes on April 15th. But you're all great people. You sign up for the first webinar, so I know you have a leg up on the competition, and you're going to submit it hopefully before March is over. So now we have time for some questions, and I am just going to scroll through here and see if I could catch them. Just be patient with me here. How many students apply each year? I don't have the numbers off the bat, but we do have the class profile. So if you were able to download the class profile, which is an example right here, this is for 2019. I don't think it has how many applicants we had, but it's broken down by race, gender, grades. We definitely have well over 1,000 applicants. I would say probably somewhere in the 4,000 fields. One moment. Bear with me, I'm just trying to pull back up the presentation. Awesome. Back to your questions. Is a member school? I believe I answered that one. Are community schools also boarding at public schools? I didn't quite understand that. That's a wonderful question, actually. So the students do not board in the public school, they board in a house that is in the neighborhood. I have visited one of these houses. I visited an all-girls house in Connecticut. It was absolutely super cute. The girls really enjoyed it. The school was very, very massive, much bigger than I ever expected it to be. So just a little tidbit on community schools. For a high school applicant, does the program prep them for college? No, our program does not prep you for college. It preps you to get into high school. Sure. Email. What does the summer workshop schedule? What is the summer workshop schedule? Again, it depends on the grade of your student. It depends on the region that you're in, but we do generally spend anywhere from 2 to 4 days with students. We teach them interview prep, we teach them essay writing, we teach them testing. I think it depends again based on your region. But we do try to talk to them about how to choose a school, making sure that they have done their research, making sure that they're prepared to interview, which is a big, big, big part, and making sure that their essays and testing they have a general idea of what good essays and good testing look like. What days in the summer do the workshops take place? That is a region-specific question. But again, I encourage you to apply early, and once you get the application in, you get a lot more information. If you become a scholar from middle school, do you have to reapply for high school? That is a fabulous question. So it depends on what type of school your student is placed into. If your student is placed into a school that goes from 6 to 12, then no, you won't have to reapply for high school. If your student school that they get placed into for 6th grade ends in 8th grade, then you are prompted to reapply, but you get automatically accepted into the program. So you have an automatic accept. You just have to update some of the things that we have on file for your students. Ms. Brown asked, can we apply for more than one child? I have an 8 and 12-year-old. Yes, you can certainly apply for more than one child. As long as you're open to all options, we are open to helping you and as many of your kids as possible. How much of the admission is based on benchmark testing? Benchmark testing is only a piece of the puzzle. We do consider everything, including your students' extracurricular activities, especially their grades and teacher recommendations. So those three are like the triangle of admissions in terms of considering your student's application. Does the financial aid lean towards loans or scholarship? We do not encourage anyone to get loans because guess what? After your student goes to independent school, then they have to go to college. So we don't encourage families to get loans for independent schools. We do, the schools, again, are the ones who offer you financial aid. My daughter is in third grade. Can she still apply being she's going to fourth grade in September? If your daughter is currently in third grade, then we would ask you to wait a year because we do not place for fifth grade. So she could certainly apply next February when she's in fourth grade. How do we get/send teacher recommendations? When you start your application, all that information will be in there as well as links to prompt them to sign those things. So start your application and you'll be able to send teacher recommendation. Can the exams be taken more than once? Our benchmark exam is only taken once, but the actual exam, which is the ISEE and SSAT in the fall, can be taken multiple times, although we generally don't encourage taking them more than 2 to 3 times. We think that's a little bit of an overkill, and we generally don't see much growth in terms of score differences if they're taken more than twice or 3 times. What is the difference between SSAT and the application benchmark test? The application benchmark test is an old SSAT, so your student is getting practice ahead of the actual exam in the fall. What is the schedule of if my child gets in? I talked about that. Do all students take the benchmark exam on the same day? No, all students do not take the benchmark exam on the same day. Someone asked if household families income over 100,000, do they see issues with financial aid? It really depends on the school. Some schools are willing to go over and beyond, some schools aren't. It depends on the school's budget. We don't have insight to the school's financial aid office, but again, we can help you as much as we can in terms of appealing for more aid if you need it. What are some member schools that you work with in New York? So just a heads up, if you go on our website, there is a list of our member schools that you could search for. But some member schools that we work with in New York, for example, Trevor Day, Grace Church, Dalton, Convent of the Sacred Heart, uh, Riverdale. Those are just some of them. But the list of schools is on our website. My daughter is in a gifted children program. Can her gifted teacher recommend? It has to be a teacher at school. So if the teacher at school is a gifted children program teacher, then certainly. If my child is in sixth grade, what grade does she need to study for the SSAT? Sixth grade, I'm assuming. What is the income eligibility for a better chance program? We encourage all families, especially if you're making less than 250K less than that, to apply. That's just a ballpark. Are there credit checks for financial aid? That's a question that you will get response to in December when you do the financial aid workshop. If the student is in eighth grade now, the student will be placed for 10th grade, correct? We do not accept everyone that meets the requirements. It's it is a competitive pool. So we accept the strongest students out of the pool of applicants. Do you have any issues with applicants already in independent schools? No, we do not. We actually do help our students who are in private schools go to other private schools. That's perfectly fine. Is it possible to know where the benchmark tests are given? We live in rural Maine. If you live in a state that is outside of one of our bases, then you are generally excused from the benchmark testing. But again, when you apply, you'll be given all of that information. I'm just making sure I've covered all your questions. There is no passing score to be accepted into the program. We consider, again, the entire profile of a student. If a program doesn't prep for college, why would high school applicants be part of your school, a part of your pool? Because we place them up until 11th grade. So we do have students currently in high school, a high school ninth grader that we place for 11th grade, a high school, well, we only place from 9 to 11, but we do place students up until 11th grade. So we place students in ninth grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. So that is why we, even though we don't prep for college, that we still have high schoolers in our pool. What if the student has a diagnosed learning disability which affects one area of study more than the other? Are there different considerations for student diagnosed with the disabilities? That would depend on your students. That would depend on what schools they're looking to apply to. Some schools are open to working with students with learning disabilities. Some schools aren't. But that's something, again, that we could cross that bridge when we get there. Do you have templates for young applicants to use to ask for recommenders for letters? Once you start the application, you will have the link to send to teachers directly to fill out the application form. You have an issue with applicants. Sorry, I think I answered that. My daughter goes to a large middle school, so she does not have very much contact with her guidance counselor. Can I send in a dean recommendation instead? No, you cannot. It has to be a guidance counselor or a principal. We advise you to get to know them as soon as possible. Introduce yourself. This is a great time to do so before the application deadline. If you have an application from 2 years ago, can you use the same application and update it for this year? I'm pretty sure that some things have changed over the last 2 years, in particular, the things your students like, um, your teacher recommendation, their grades, so you cannot use the same application. We encourage you to update as much as you can. Are there other schools that are not member schools that we can still apply to through ABC? Unfortunately, we only work with our member schools. So you have 329 of them to work with. So we hope that's enough for you. There are about 6 to 7 workshops. I see someone asked about how many workshops for parents. They tend to be in most part for the entire family, not necessarily just geared toward parents, although some like the financial aid workshop would obviously just be for parents. But in total, there's about 7 workshops. Someone asked what percentage of candidates are placed in a member school. That varies by region. So Miss Ryan, I don't know what region you're from, so I'm hesitant to answer that question. But based on your region, you could definitely reach out to them specifically and ask that question. All right, I'm just making sure. Assistant principal cannot write the recommendation. It has to be the principal or guidance counselor and an English or math teacher. If the report card does not have number grades, that is fine. We will read it as much as we can and try and equalize it with what we know. We've been doing this for a very long time, so we've seen all kinds of applications. There is no application fee to apply. The application is free. This is a good question. How far do you suggest placements? For instance, if you live in California, would you suggest placements just regionally, or are schools in other regions also suggested? So I currently work in the New York Metro Northeast region, and I currently have 4 students in California. 3 of them are at the Kate School and 1 at Thatcher. So we encourage families to keep an open mind. Not every family is open, but again, those families were open and they got both the aid and the acceptance letter. So we do encourage families to look far and wide. If my student is accepted as a scholar, are there any courses or guidance on how to navigate the different socioeconomic structure that are part of attending one of these schools? So we do have an orientation for our students the summer before they head off to those schools, where we talk about navigating these new environments that they are. We talk about microaggressions. We talk about how you ask for help. We do try our very best to prepare them as much as possible the summer before they leave for these schools. Can a student be placed in a non-member school ever? If you sign up for a non-member school, then you cannot be a better chance scholar. If my son is currently in 6th grade, do we apply this year or next year for 9th grade placement? You would have to be in 7th grade to apply for 9th grade placements. Assistant principal cannot write the recommendation letter. It has to be the principal or the dean. I mean, the principal or the guidance counselor. Please go off of what the website application says. You can definitely apply to multiple independent and boarding schools. We have students apply to a number of schools. Can you delay accepting? No, you cannot delay accepting. You can certainly apply if you're a single parent. And what's the priority in your selection process? The priority in our selection process is a student who is well-rounded as much as possible, who shows potential. Again, it does vary by region, because what might work for a New York City kid probably will not work for a student from Georgia in terms of being in our cohort. Okay, so I am just going to shut it down. I would like again to thank you all so very, very much for attending, for being wonderful listeners, for being wonderful guests. I hope you start your application and have it in soon. And do contact us with any questions that you have. If you go online and start your application, you will have access to all the information that you need. Hope you all have a wonderful night and take good care of yourselves.